Kia ora, good evening. Yesterday, police in conjunction with Public Health South and the Invercargill City Council licensing inspector conducted a controlled purchase operation in the city. A controlled purchase operation is one where police send an underage person into a licensed premises to test for compliance with provisions of the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act. In this case, a 17-year-old female was sent into 13 assorted licensed premises throughout the city. 4 outlets visited failed the test. Those premises were the Southland Tavern, Otatara Foursquare, Ziff's Cafe Bar and Tuatara Backpackers. Sergeant John Harris of the Alcohol Harm Prevention Unit says while 4 out of 13 fails is a slight improvement on previous operations, it's still a disappointing result. In 2 of the incidents, the sale was made with no questions being asked. Business owners and representatives met today at a workshop on business continuity planning. This is the second of 3 interactive workshops being run by Emergency Management Southland, targeting small to medium-sized businesses. The half-day event is designed to help businesses create their own contingency plans in the event of an emergency. Run in conjunction with the fire service, topics included disaster recovery, staff safety, critical business activities and asset protection. The need to strategise and prepare business survival in an emergency was highlighted following the Christchurch earthquakes. As reported yesterday in South Today News, the City Council Finance and Policy Committee has recommended a rates increase of 0.43%. I asked Councillor Neil Boniface how the proposal of one of the lowest rates increases in decades came about.
Well, we've been lucky in some ways. We've had a new renegotiation of our electricity, which is quite a high figure for council, right across the pumping stations and through all the council assets. So we've saved $500,000 a year for the next 3 years on renegotiating that. There's some refinancing of smarter ways of doing our finance, and so we've saved money there. We've put some charges up, so the dog fees will go up $5 to $6. But we're actually making some big improvements in the animal control, so that you'll see some really good results for us doing that, so improved service. And we've also put the parking, on-street parking fees up slightly. So,
Why? I know it's a lot dearer to park in other centres, but will this encourage people to come into the city? We do want people in the city.
Yes, I think that's a good question, and we deliberated over that. But what we're doing is keeping the off-street car parking the same price, so that if you want to park in a metered space outside a shop, then you pay slightly more. But if you go to an off-street park, and there are plenty of those around town, then the price is the same.
What is the process when your committee gets together and considers? Everyone has input and then you just work through the process?
Yes, we had a workshop with all the councillors involved, and that was when the 3.72 proposed increase was put forward, which was still a pretty low starting figure. And then the councillors had their input and said they still want to get it down lower than that, and so the staff have really worked hard to get it down now to the levels that we're suggesting.
Where to now in the process? It's open for public council input now?
Yeah, well, the councillors have got to sign off on it, and that'll be done on the 5th of March at the council meeting, and then it goes out for public submission. So we're expecting submissions, and every time we have submissions, people ask for more things to be put in the budget, and others say to keep it even lower.
Could we be running the risk? You mentioned before that Eve Paul era that ratepayers could have paid afterwards because of that low rate. You can't see anything here. Let's look at things that may crop up, for instance.
Yeah, well, there are things that are going to crop up. We've got this problem at Kennington, and so we've got a pipeline that exists, but there's got to be reticulation of some certain areas we're having problems with out there. And so that could be a big cost, but that's a loan. So we would take out a loan for that, and that would have a small impact on the rating increase. We've got Anderson Park, which is we haven't got any figures yet. So, but we want to actually fix it up and bring it up to 67% of the building code. That could be $250,000 or $500,000. We have got some reserves in a building fund to allow for that, and probably the big one probably is the government is going to change the FAR rate, which is the financial assistant rate for roading, so that could hit us next year. So there are things out there that could have an impact on next year's rates, but we're still hopefully sustainable with what we've done this time.
What is in the back of your mind then, perhaps, that it could end up at around what Lindsay Thomas expected, about 1.5?
Well, that was my original suggestion to council, is that for the next 3 years we keep it at 5%, which is about 1.5% for the next 3 years. But I think this is sustainable, and next year hopefully we can keep it around that same level of 1.5%.
The final day of the Southern Institute of Technology's 16th Orientation Week took place today. The Feast of Middle-earth Hangi was a hit with hungry students, as were the free drinks and fruit. SIT has around 11,000 students enrolled this year. The most popular courses are IT nursing and trades, especially OSH, project management, quantity surveying and construction. International students make up just over 10% of this year's intake, due to the international student intake being capped. International students come from Asia, Indian subcontinent, South America, North America, Europe and Russia. Meanwhile, the SIT music students surprised students on campus and the public in S Street with a flash mob today. Around 40 music students from SIT's Bachelor of Music degree busted some moves in Invercargill's main shopping centre at lunchtime, to the amusement of passers-by. Casually starting with a single busker, students slowly mingled, joined in and finally danced in unison before dispersing after their performance. Music tutor Holly Longman-Fleck says tutors pitched the ideas to students this week as a way to get them interacting, and says they embrace the idea and choreograph dance moves as well. Stay with us right after this break. The celebrations of a century passing since Will Scotland made his historic flight between Invercargill and Gore, and the week that was. Welcome back to South Today News. Yesterday marked the centenary of an historic flight from Invercargill to Gore by English flyer William Scotland. Last night, Scotland's flight, the first overland from one destination to another in New Zealand or Australia, was replicated and celebrated by aviation enthusiasts. The enterprising young English flyer spent his inheritance on buying a Cauldron biplane, had it shipped to New Zealand. He then set up a company to charge people to see his plane and watch him fly. In what was referred to as a voyage in the print media at the time, William Scotland decided to start his pioneering adventure in Invercargill.
He only, in fact, made two flights of any substance, and the first, of course, was from Invercargill to Gore. And that happened to be the first flight over any distance from any point A to point B that anybody had made up until that time.
In New Zealand?
In New Zealand and Australia. Now, prior to that time, a number of people had flown aircraft that they'd made or that kind of thing, but they had always landed where they took off, or they didn't get very far, or they proved that their concept could perhaps fly, but that was it. But Will Scotland was the first person to actually go from one place to another, and of a substantial length. And of course, here we are, we're celebrating the fact that he got from Invercargill to Gore.
Celebrating with planes from the collection of the Croydon Air Services were members of the Tiger Moth Club of New Zealand, with many returning after taking part in the 76th celebration.
Well, we're lucky that the Tiger Club, of which a number of these aircraft belong to people in the Tiger Club, as far away as Auckland. On Will Scotland's 76th anniversary, they were here, and we celebrated it then by a similar sort of flight. And we decided to do it again for the 100, and they fitted their tour, so they're back again, the same group of people, to celebrate the centenary of the flight, yes. So we've got quite a lot of aircraft that are from the 1940s and some a little bit earlier.
The orange fox moth that followed William Scotland's route above the railway tracks to Gore also flew the same route to mark the 50th anniversary of the pioneering aviation achievement. This fox moth, the first ever plane to make a scheduled flight by New Zealand's first ever airline, Air Travel New Zealand, in December 1934 from Hokitika to South Westland. Also enjoying the nostalgia was vintage aircraft enthusiast Frank Binnan, who, like many, had little knowledge of Will Scotland's historic air voyage to Gore a century ago.
I'd never heard of the man. I didn't realise 100 years ago they flew a plane between here and Gore.
And they called it a voyage in the newspaper.
I would imagine it must have been, because the plane must have been particularly crude 100 years back.
It was from Timaru that he made the longest flight, from Timaru to Christchurch. And on the way, he dropped off a handbook for a carburettor of an aero engine at Temuka. And we think that was the first time that there was, something was delivered by air.
The group of heritage planes replicated Scotland's flight right down to the departure time, allowing for daylight savings, but couldn't land where Scotland did at the Gore Showgrounds in 1914, landing instead at the home of the Croydon Collection at Mandeville. And the celebrations continue this weekend at Mandeville, where the Croydon Aviation Heritage Trust and Air Services are holding their annual fly-in. Hunter Andrews, South Today News. Well, that's all from the news team for this week. Sport is up next. We'll leave you now with the week that was.